Welcome to Climate Forward, the podcast where we explore the actions and stories of the European Climate Pact Ambassadors. My name is Mansour Philipp Garabaghi, and I am your host. My guest in this episode is Samira Ibrahim. With Samira, we will talk about the importance of water, the connection between religion and sustainability, and the challenge of inclusivity in climate action.
Even if you own a flowing river, you should still not waste water. At this moment, to live a sustainable life in the Netherlands, you need to have a certain financial income.
Samira Ibrahim, thank you very much for joining me today at the Climate Forward podcast.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Samira, you have a very interesting background and a very interesting field of work. And we're going to talk about this, and it's very closely intertwined with your work that you want to do or that you're doing as a European Climate Pact Ambassador.
Yes, so my name is Samira Ibrahim. I'm half Dutch, half Egyptian. I was raised and born in Amsterdam, and at the age of 12, I went to live in Egypt with my parents and siblings. I stayed there for 12 years also. And I came back to the Netherlands in 2015. So that's a bit about me personally. In terms of my educational developments and professionally, I started in Egypt at the University of Cairo with my bachelor in environmental and water studies, which I also finished there. And when I came back to the Netherlands in 2015, I started a master's in water management at the Technical University in Delft. And in 2018, I also did a master's at the Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam in the field of theology and religious studies. And I studied international relations at the Clingendael Institute in The Hague. And I do have a very specific reason for studying in different disciplines.
And I think we'll get to that in a minute,
yes,
because that's one of the sort of linking pins between all the things that you're doing.
Yes.
Water management, you mentioned to me that you started your studies in Cairo
Yes.
and then finished them in Delft. A few episodes ago, we already had a guest that was actually working in the water field. So I know it is something that we need to pay a lot of attention to. That's really important. But you also mentioned that you studied theology and international relations. And I already know that those three things together build a net that sort of is your area of expertise. And I would very much invite you to share a bit how and why you have chosen those three fields of expertise.
Yeah, so let me first start with my background in water engineering and water management. I was invited yesterday for to give a certain presentation, and I mentioned exactly the same. It's quite interesting to observe how much water we use daily as human beings, but also I don't know of any human being who doesn't use water during a day. Like, even if I ask you the question, did you use water today? You will definitely say yes. Either you drink water, or you wake up and you wash your hands and face with water, you take a shower. So you're actually interacting with water the whole day. But very few people who ask themselves, where does this water come from and how did it reach me from the river to the tap I am opening? And I noticed that when I was growing up in Egypt, one of the main sources of life there is the Nile, the river, which is very polluted at the same time. And that was, for me, confusing, because how can we as human beings pollute a source which is so important for us? And we all know, without water, there is no life. Like, you can basically live without anything except for water. So And then it was confusing for me also, the very little attention we pay to how this water is managed, organized, but also cleaned. How does it reach us from the rain to the river to our households? So in Egypt, when I knew that there is a department at the University of Cairo focusing on water management and water engineering, I was very interested in joining that. And more interesting is the fact that very few people in Egypt focus on this kind of knowledge. And even less people know about the existence of this kind of studies. And I came back to the Netherlands in 2015, where I also started to focus on water management at the Technical University of Delft. And it was also a shock there to see that some people studying at the Technical University of Delft don't know that there is a department focused on water management and water engineering. And again, it's very interesting for me because you actually can't imagine your life without water. But somehow we take it for granted. However, for those who focus on the news and follow the news, there are some severe articles and information coming from Italy, France, but also in the Netherlands, that if we don't focus on paying more attention to how we manage water, even in the Netherlands, we can face problems with drinking water in 2030. And during my stay in Egypt, as a Muslim myself, I was also wondering how come that a country with a majority of Muslim people, and from an Islamic perspective, water is also important because you use it for your daily prayers. But we are also taught by Islam that it's very important to take care of water. So we have a very important saying by the Prophet Muhammad: even if you own a flowing river, you should still not waste water. So we do have a lot of inspiring perspectives from Islam when it comes to how to interact with nature. However, I didn't see that in practice, in practical life, in reality. And then I also decided to study more on theology and religion to understand what the reason is that we easily call ourselves Muslim without really practicing every detail of the religion. And of course, we are not angels and we can't do everything perfectly, but these are not unimportant stuff. How we deal with nature, with water, these are not unimportant stuff. So that was one of my motivations to focus also on religion and theology. Also, it's a fact that worldwide 80% of the population affiliates themselves with a certain religion. But we tend to forget that fact when we deal with global challenges. So when we talk about sustainability, international security, we usually talk about the technical stuff, the political aspects, but religion is a very powerful force, and it can be very constructive, but it also can be very destructive. And I don't believe that it's smart to neglect that dimension of when we talk about global challenges. So that was for me another motivation to include that dimension in a theme like sustainability.
And I already can see how the red thread then goes to Clingendael Institute, to the international studies, which basically to me seems like a necessity to follow up.
Because topics like water management, sustainability, we can't fix it as a country independently. You need a global movement. So then I was invited to study at the Clingendael Institute and to focus on international relations.
A lot of very interesting topics. When we look at the water topic, I think you're very right. We know far too little, and we don't realize where this incredible convenience of simply turning on the tap and getting fresh water comes from, and how much work goes into it. So this is an important topic. I think there's no discussion about it. And there are a lot of solutions, like you said, technical ideas, be more careful with water, be more aware how you use it. But you mentioned theology and religion as something that you were very interested in, and 80% you mentioned of the world population adhere or follow a religion. And I don't know if then this is one of the big monotheistic religions or simply that these people are spiritual in one way or the other. And I think irrespective of which religion or spiritual movement you want to follow, many of them have built into their rules some very, very senseful thinking that is the basis for why these things have been laid out as they are in the books that we know today. I would like to ask you to share a bit if you have come across these things, or how you have been able to take a look at theology in connection with sustainability.
So two parts. So at one part, I really focus on my Islamic background and the teachings from the Islamic traditions and the Islamic community. But as a religious scholar, I also pay attention to other religions, not to teach them what their religion tells them about nature and ecology, but to make them aware. Look at your spiritual movement or your religious background and the scriptures, and try to get inspirations from that to have a better interaction with nature. And I also work on the interreligious part. So how can we as different religious communities come together and increase our impact and work towards a sustainable movement together? When I talk about the content, it will be mainly from my Islamic background, because I don't see myself qualified to talk for example, about the Jewish context or the Christian context. I know personally people who are really inspired by those traditions to do better for nature and the climate. For example, in Jewish, you have the concept Tikkun Olam, to heal the earth. But from an Islamic perspective, as I said, I mentioned already the saying of the Prophet Muhammad, where he inspires Muslims to be very conscious about how you use certain resources. So even if you have a flowing river, don't waste water. And this saying is for me very important, because sometimes, especially now within the climate crisis, sometimes I feel that there is a tendency to say, well, let us take care of our actions right now, and we need to do better because we need to save the climate, as if doing better is only related to the climate crisis, which actually implicitly also says, if the climate crisis is over, we can do whatever we want to do again, like we used to do. But in such sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, what I actually read also in the message is, whatever your situation is, whether you have a climate crisis or not, whether you face problems or not, whether you are facing scarcity or not, you have to be very aware of how you interact with certain resources, and you don't want to waste, even if you have it's not dependent on scarcity or having plenty of something. In both cases, you need to be very careful with what you use and how you use it. Yeah. So that's a very important principle, which I take from my Islamic background, and which I really try to give a more a larger place also in the awareness of Islamic communities. So what I'm doing right now is Also talking with certain mosques in the Netherlands to encourage the imams who give the sermons on Friday to include this part in their sermons. Like at Friday, you have hundreds of Muslims going to the mosque, and most of them really pay attention to the sermon because it's an important part of their religion. The imam has a certain authority in his community, and so from my perspective, he also has a certain responsibility also when it comes to these kinds of topics. And what we see with certain religious communities, whether they are Muslims or Christian or Jewish, that sometimes the religious authority is way more impactful in certain communities than, for example, the government. And I do see an opportunity there for governments to work together with religious communities to cover all communities in a certain place, whether they take authority from the government or their religious leaders. But so I don't believe that moving towards a sustainable future, including everyone, is possible without also empowering faith-based communities and strengthening also the interfaith relations between those communities.
I think this specific application of trying to find ways how can we motivate people in their faith to contribute to being more sustainable is, for lack of a better word, quite inspiring. And I want to come back because the reason why we met and why you're also sitting here with me today is because you're a European Climate Pact Ambassador. Can you tell me a little bit how you, in your work as a European Climate Pact Ambassador, connect the different dots that your knowledge makes up?
So for me, my ambassadorship is really part of who I am. So the moment I start speaking about sustainability, water-related issues, or climate change, from my perspective, those are also the moments I am acting as a climate ambassador. So for me, there is no separation between who I am, what I do, and my climate ambassadorship. Even the moments I'm reading about climate change to increase my knowledge or studying, at those moments for myself, I'm also acting as a climate ambassador.
Samira, sorry if I interrupt you here. How did you find out about the Climate Pact? How did you come to be an ambassador?
Yeah, so it started that I was being trained as a climate ambassador at the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Climate in the Netherlands. And one of my mentors there was Laura de Vries. I think you know her. Yeah, and she, at that moment, she was part of the EU Climate Pact Ambassador program. And she introduced me to Fons, who is the coordinator of the program. And that way I became part of the pact. So it was through my network.
Okay. Well, it shows again the power of networks.
Yes.
And importance. But coming back to connecting these different dots, because you mentioned that, right? And I want to recap very quickly. So water studies is where your original interest in academia was, then via the Clingendael Institute, international studies. And I know that you also work at a large think tank or the largest Dutch forum for sustainability.
Springtij.
Yeah, Springtij.
Yes. I am very active in the academic scene. So as a researcher, but also as a teacher and lecturer, I do a lot of research when it comes to, so part of my research is very technical. So I do research in the water sector, which is very technical, but I also do research where disciplines are overlapped. So I also write a lot on spiritual ecology. So studying the ecological system, not only from the engineering and technical part, but also including the religious perspectives, spiritual dimensions of our relation with nature. And I'm also very active when it comes to the social dimension. So for me, it's very important to connect academia and society, and to have a social impact with my research. And Springtij is for me one of the places where I really feel that I can combine my different talents, backgrounds, and disciplines. So Springtij, it's as you introduced it, it's the largest Dutch forum for sustainability, and every year at the end of September we have a festival in Terschelling. Terschelling is one of the islands above the Netherlands, and what we do there is that we invite the largest stakeholders within the sustainability field from the whole Netherlands. So those in academia, but also from the industry, from the political organizations, ministry, all important stakeholders to come together, to exchange their knowledge, to inspire each other, and hopefully to accelerate the movement towards a more sustainable world with a focus on the Netherlands. So that's for me, Springtij, it actually embodies something I try to do in daily life, combining the scientific research with policy making, with NGOs and social impact.
I want to touch upon one more topic, and that is something that has to do with one of my previous guests, Willem Grootong, who talked about youth participation, and he talked about the challenges of being inclusive. And you talked about going into the Muslim community, into mosques, to draw attention at the religious service towards the topic of sustainability. Is that something where we still lack action in terms of outreach? Do we ignore religion as a trigger to get change?
Definitely. So, and not only religion. When I look at the current sustainability movement, for example, in the Netherlands, I think we lack intergenerational interactions. We lack the inclusion of spiritual and religious communities. We also lack the inclusion of certain social communities. So what I refer to a lot in my presentations and talks is that, honestly, at this moment, to live a sustainable life in the Netherlands, you need to have a certain financial income. So as if you can only participate in moving towards a more sustainable world if you are from a certain social class. For me, that's a very painful fact, because this way you are excluding a huge part of society who are also human beings, who will also be affected with the impacts and effects of climate change, maybe even worse than those who already are financially safe. You are excluding them for working towards a better and safer and healthier environment. And I believe that's cruel. So I truly believe that if we really want to realize a sustainable world, we can't leave anyone behind. And I'm now actually repeating one of the slogans of the SDGs as written by the United Nations, because their promise was to leave no one behind. And we are now in 2023. The goal for the SDGs is until 2030. I don't think that until now we are seriously working on not leaving anyone behind. So, and that's really one of my calls towards political institutions, ministries, and the government to pay more focus on how to also include all social classes when it comes to striving towards a more sustainable environment, and to empower also those who don't have the financial means, maybe to subsidize them or to make biological and eco-friendly food more accessible.
Yeah, I very much agree with that, and this is totally non-scientific and subjective, but depending, of course, which area of your city you shop in, the produce in your supermarket will vary, and the amount of organic or biologically grown food will decrease or increase.
Yeah. And also, I do have a colleague who wrote an article on this lately, that even if you look at certain cities, the shops where you can buy eco-friendly food, they are only in the neighborhoods where they know that people can afford them. Like even in neighborhoods where majority of people cannot afford them, they don't even have the luxury to go to such places, and they're not introduced to it because they usually are located in neighborhoods among those who can financially afford it. So,
yeah, without going into too much detail here, because we did discuss this with Willem Grootonk in a previous podcast. This bias is also visible when you see at who gets active on climate action, right? The people who can become active are people who can afford to have the time to do that. If I have to work 10 hours a day to put food on the table, I don't most likely have the time at night to join the voluntary ambassador calls and the
That's
likes.
true.
So I think this is something that where there's a certain responsibility of society manifested by politicians or whatever you want to act as a correcting factor and ensure that, like you said it before, we don't leave anyone behind. To close off our discussion with a question about outreach and the effect of what you're doing, I am very interested whether you see a positive response when you go into the communities and when you talk about sustainability into communities that may not expect this topic to come to them.
To be honest, I'm very surprised by the willingness of people to join certain plans and the positive responses. Even in the Netherlands, we at this moment we have around 3 or 4 mosques really focusing also on making their buildings more sustainable, trying to empower and educate themselves on how to make sustainability a part of also not only their buildings but also the awareness and mindset they spread within those buildings. So I really do see a lot of positive movements and actions happening. It's not enough, definitely, but that's not a problem as long as we are moving and going on and trying to take more people with us. So yes, I'm hopeful myself, but I always say, for me as a human being, I'm not so much focused on the results as much as I'm focused on the process and taking responsibility. Like, at the end of the day, you want to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I try to do my best. Also from an Islamic perspective, the results are not in hand of the human beings. Like results, they are in hand of God. But what human beings can do is to actually stand up and do something. And that's also my appeal to everyone listening, to motivate yourself and stimulate yourself to reach such a point that you can tell yourself, I'm trying to do my best. Whatever the outcome is, whatever the result is, whatever the future of our world will be, at least I can say that I try to do my best, that I try to empower the people around me, that I tried to be the best example I could for others when it comes towards to thriving towards a more sustainable environment.
These are some beautiful closing words, I think, and it also shows the power of what you can do if you act, and the power of inclusion and taking people with you along the way. So thank you very much, Samira, for joining me today and for letting us have a look into your work and what you're doing, and also for sharing, even if only for me maybe, some or very new perspectives and very interesting perspectives. Thanks a lot for taking the time.
Thank you for inviting me and for taking the time to listen to me.
It was really interesting. Thank you. You just listened to Samira Ibrahim talk about the importance of water, the connection between religion and sustainability, and the challenge of inclusivity in climate action. If you want to hear more about the European Climate Pact Ambassadors and their actions, subscribe to my podcast so you don't miss out on new episodes.